All right, we're back live with Hal Gill on the Museum of Early American Tools by Eric Sloane. Now, this is a little volume that has been illustrated by Eric Sloane, and it talks about how early American tools were made and used. And we have gotten through a bit about axes, and we're now into a section called How the Broad Axe Works, or how the broad axe was used more properly. There it is. And you've got some illustrations of exactly how it was used as well. So I'll let you peruse those a little bit. And then we'll read the text. How the broad axe was used. Any old timer is willing to tell you how to use a broad axe, but each one is bound to describe a different method. Trying to ferret out the truth, I asked everyone who visited my collection if the visitor claimed he knew the art to demonstrate broad axing. Some, quote, used to stand upon the log, hewing as they walked along it, unquote. Quote, but you wouldn't be able to reach the log with so short a handle. You'd chop your toes off, unquote, was my reply. But they insisted and offered to demonstrate. The doctor managed to sew one toe back on very nicely. Actually, a walk along the log method was used, but with a special broad axe, unlike the ancient ones with bent handles. This is shown on the following page. And there's the following page. Okay. So, as for the ancient chisel-edged broad axe, you walked alongside the log, working as you went. One man would swing horizontally with the grain, another would hit straight downward, another would strike at an angle. As for me, I contend there was no generally accepted procedure. Mercer, in Ancient Carpenter's Tools, says the broad axe was used, quote, held with both hands, right hand foremost. The leg face was set against the workman's left side, and he hewed with both hands, not long ways with the grain, but diagonally downward across it. Dogs were used to fasten logs to be worked on, and they show some of these dogs down at the bottom of the page. There we go. So the broad axing began with a chalk line as the log was bark stripped to the brown underbark and twanged with a squaring cord, and that making a chalk line at the areas where you're going to cut. There is a talk about that. It goes on to say the two first standing on the log with a long-handled felling axe, scoring the line and scoring deep vertical cuts. Often the piece between intervals were split off, and you got a little illustration of doing that on top of the log, and then standing alongside the log, you hew the line, holding the broad axe with two hands, right hand foremost, left knee close to the log. The final smooth hewing was done. So there you go. And you can see that actually demonstrated in Colonial Williamsburg to this day on the carpenter's yard. So, and I think a lot of them use this book, actually. Roy Underhill, who hosted the Woodwright Shop on PBS, some of you may know about. He was a friend of my father's and mine, and he does a lot of that kind of work still, as far as I know. Teaches it, too. So, down in North Carolina, I believe, if I'm not mistaken. You have to look that up and fact check me on that. So we're going to do the next chapter called The Giant and the Midget, and we're going to do these just a little bit by little bit so we don't wear out people's patience. A giant and a midget. The straight-handled broadaxe, a knife-edged axe beveled on both sides, was usually used to hew railroad ties. Logging railroads that make their ties out of soft wood hew just two sides of the log. A tree was felled at a slight angle, held at one end by its own branches, and the hewer walked along first up and then down, flattening the sides as he went. The same axe was used both for scoring and hewing. This process seems difficult, but it was fast. Because this axe has a straight handle, it is often mistaken for some rehandled ancient broadaxe, ground on two sides to convert it into a felling axe. The only clue to its true use is that its ponderous head is much too heavy to swing sideways, as an axe must be swung in felling. The smallest version of the hewing axe is the carpenter's hewing axe hatchet. The carpenter's hewing hatchet, shown below. It sometimes looks like a toy model of the big one. Never used to split wood or drive nails, these hatchets were used for shaping. And there's the illustration of the carpenter's hewing hatchet. And on the other page, a more recent broadaxe, 3 feet long from 1893, is illustrated at the top. And there you can see the guys working on a tree to make railroad ties and some other axes below it. They are the hewing hatchet. It's about 1 foot and was made before 1820 in the case of the top one. And then there's one from 1800 and one from 1750. The eye is bulged on one side and one side is sharpened, as they show at this bottom illustration. There we go. So for those of you who've just joined us, Natasha Gines, good to see you, Tiffany, Sarah Taylor, and Brenda. We are reading from the Museum of Early American Tools by Eric Sloane. It's just one thing I've added to my repertoire of things I do here on Substack, and glad to have had you join us. I expect that it's going to be interesting to a few. This book, pen and ink sketches by the dozen, illuminating text. It makes a Museum of Early American Tools a delight for all those who enjoy Americana. Available for the first time, it covers early tools and wooden and metal artifacts that our forefathers made with them. Fresh, informal, direct, and expressive, it covers building tools and methods, farm and kitchen equipment, and the tools of curriers, farriers, wheelwrights, coopers, blacksmiths, coachmakers, sawyers, loggers, tanners, and many of the other proud and individualistic craftsmen of the pre-industrial age. This is a big part of my life as I was growing up, as my father was a historian for historic trades in particular. Among other things, he wrote The Gunsmith in Colonial Virginia, which I have here somewhere nearby. I can't seem to lay my hand on it right now. That's usually the case, as I'll start to talk about something, think I have it at hand, and then I don't. But that's the way it goes. And how the cookie crumbles, as it turns out. So thank you for joining. Keep being the change you want to see in the world. And we'll be back with another edition of The Passing Show, or a Harrowings podcast, or something like it in the near future. In this here.